Khwarezm, Mawarun-Nahr, and Khorasan. Places where the heart of Central Asia once beat and where the most fertile lands of the world are located. The geography where many events that shaped history were experienced. This region, which contains the heritage of ancient cultures and civilizations, would raise many scientists and thinkers who would leave their mark on the next periods and enlighten the horizons of all humanity and present them to the community.
I was born on Thursday, which was the third day of the Zul-Hajr month of 326. My birthplace is Khwarezm, located exactly 1 hour east of Medinatu Salam, Baghdad, and 41.28 degrees north latitude. I've had a strong desire to learn many arts and sciences since my childhood. I would like to share a memory on this subject. When I was a child, a Byzantine person came to our country to visit. I never forget. I asked and learned about the names of plants, fruits, and seeds in his language and recorded them. Now I'm 80 years old. The shadows of older age have given their signs. My ears can only hear loud voices but cannot solve words much. A person in my situation wants a friend, a fellow. He is such a fellow that he must understand his noble and compassionate state and help. However, where and how to find such people?
Biruni was born in Birun, or as the local people call it, Birun or Beirun, which is located in the outskirts of the city of Kars in the Khwarezm land. On the right bank of Amu Darya River in the northeast of today's Hive city in Uzbekistan, therefore he is given the title of Biruni, which means a local from Birun. We have very little knowledge about Biruni's childhood and youth years. He says, "I do not know my pedigree nor my family members." Then he adds, "How could I know what I don't even know my father very well?" Islamic sources generally call this place Khwarezm, which was surrounded by Mawara-un-Nahr in the east and the land of the Oghuzes in the west, Khorasan in the south, and Turkish lands in the north. The Amu Darya River, which is one of the 4 rivers that are said to come from heaven and which originates from the points of 4,950 meters high Pamir and the Hindu Kush mountains meet, advances towards the west, crosses the Khwarezm region, and pours into the Aral Lake.
According to the Khwarezmians, their ancestors, the Afrikids, came and settled around Belhan Mountain near the Amu Darya River, pouring into the Caspian Sea in the first millennium BC. Later, due to conflict with the Turks here, they migrated to the Khwarezm region in the 3rd century AD. They came near the city of Kars and settled here.
Here the Afrikids mingled with the indigenous people, made a great leap in a short time, and developed the Khwarezm region. On the one hand, they opened the canals and increased productivity of the lands that they irrigated. Thus, they made it the agricultural center of the period. On the other hand, they enriched the economics of developing the Khwarezm-Ital-Volga trade route that runs in the east, west, and north-south directions. Thus, the Khwarezm region became one of the most prosperous regions of the Central Asian Turkish world in those days. One of the biggest cities of the region at that time was the old city of Urgench, which is known as Konya Urgench, located on the left side of the Amu Darya River, opposite Kars, in the northwest of the city hive. Urgench, which is also described as the gate to Turkestan, made great progress, especially during the Memonist period, and became the leading science and trade center of the Khorasan region.
At the time of Biruni's birth, the ruler of the Khorasan region was Mansur ibn Abdullah ibn Iraq, who is one of the Afrikids. Rulers of this region were given the title Harem Shah. Later, this family became known as al-Iraq.
We do not have precise information about Biruni's nationality. In his works, he states that he is not of Persian and Arab origin, and that his mother tongue is not the language of science. Since Persian, Turkish, and Sogdian were mostly used in the Khorasan region, Biruni was probably of Turkish or Sogdian origin. Since his works contain words or expressions from both languages from time to time, it is not possible to predict which one he belongs to. Stating that Arabic is the language of science as well as the language of religion, Biruni said that he is proud to write Arabic. He also said Persian does not go beyond being a fairy tale and a story language.
I learned Arabic and Persian after my mother tongue. Neither one is my mother tongue. Native languages are used in daily life, but not in any other way. Although everyone's mother tongue is nice for everyone, Arabic has penetrated into the deepest points of our hearts. Its magic has gone down to the deepest points of our being. Our religion and belief are like siblings with Arabic. For this reason, I prefer to be criticized in Arabic and to be praised in Persian. Since my childhood, I had a strong research interest and a degree of curiosity and passion for learning all kinds of information. My childhood passed in Khorasan, where I was born, and in the neighborhood of Khwarezmshah.
Biruni's teacher at the madrasa, where he was educated, noticed his love and effort. Hence, one day he grabbed him and took him to meet Abu Nasr Mansur ibn Ali ibn Iraq. His intention is that the poor boy, who is burning with the love of science, will be a very important scientist under the auspices of Abu Nasr Mansur ibn Ali ibn Iraq, since Abu Nasr is also an important scientist of the Iraq period, as well as being from Khwarezmshah family. Abu Nasr Mansur ibn Ali ibn Iraq, after meeting Biruni, would accept him as a student and take him under his protection. When Biruni was only 17 years old, he makes a measuring instrument divided into different intervals to measure the altitude of the muscle city and determines the latitude of it. 4 years later, in 995 AD, he prepares a new tool with a diameter of 15 to make a larger measurement. But he cannot perform this measurement due to conflict between Khorasan and Urgench people.
Uncomfortable with these conflicts, Biruni had to leave his homeland and come to Ray, which was near Tehran, today's Iran, where he had quite troubled days.
He has no one to protect him, and while he is here, he meets the famous astronomy scholar of the era, Hojendi. In those days, Hojendi establishes a large observation device on the mountain overlooking Ray, the request of the Emperor of Bukovid, Fakhreddin, and names this tool Estudusu Fahriya. Biruni works here for a while and writes a treatise including this tool. After Hojendi's death, Biruni leaves Ray and goes to the city of Gilan, on the shores of the Caspian Sea. While in Gilan, he writes an article in the name of Merzuban bin Rustem, the governor of the province of Ziyari. The scholar, who comes back to his homeland in 997 AD, observes a lunar eclipse in January of that year. Staying in Bukhara for a short period of time, the scholar, who is seen in the palace of Mansur II, the king of Samani, passes from there to Gorgan, the capital of the Ziyaris. Shemsu il-Ma'al Qabus bin Veshmigir, who has just returned to the throne of Ziyari in those days, hosts many scientists and thinkers, especially Ibn Sina and Biruni in his palace.
We see that Qabus ibn Veshmigir, the ruler of Ziyai, has protected him, and that Biruni has written a book called The Traces of the Past in the name of Qabus. Also in this book, there is information about the calendars used by the ancient nations. Although he is well protected and supported by Qabus, we see that Biruni isn't very fond of him, that he is a little complaining about the harshness of the monarch, which consequently makes him leave Gorgan.
Around 1,000 years, Biruni dedicates his work Al-Asuri Bakiya Ani Kurumi Khalidia, which he wrote during his time in Judah, to Qabus bin Veshmigir, and in this work he mentions his correspondence with a young man named Ibn Sina. Biruni will return to his homeland from there and will have great respect in the palace of the Emir of Urgench, Khwarazm-Shah, Abu Abbas Memun.
Shohim, Xalifa-i Ma'mun Bag'dodda o'zi qurgan inshootlar ila, buyuk binolari ila tarixda o'z nomini qoldirdi va u yerda mashhur olimlarni yig'di. Samoniylar esa Buxoroda olimu zalolarning hurmat ehtiromlarini bajo keltirib, o'z muvaffaqiyatlariga erishdilar, mashhur bo'ldilar. Shohim, siz Allohning inoyati ila azaldan ilm-urfon markazi bo'lmish, diyori bo'lmish Xorazm mulkining hukmdori bo'ldingiz. Shohim, agarda poytaxtingizga olimlarni yig'sangiz, atrofdagi butun olim faollarni bir qilsangiz, islom dunyosida nomingiz abadul abud qolgay va tarix safhalariga muhrlagaysiz. Shohim,
to'g'ri aytasiz Abu Ahmad. Lekin buning uchun ne qilmoq darkor?
Shohim, Xorazm vohasida yetishib chiqqan olimlar orasida hozir Abu Rayhan Biruni nomi keng yoyildi. O'zi Ray shahrida bo'lmuş mashhur astronom olim Al-Hujandi bilan birga bunyod etgan hisob o'lchagichlari, samon tizimlarini ko'zatish, ko'rish moslamalari bilan mashhur olimlar orasida Xuroson va Movrahun nahrida mashhur bo'lishdi. Shohim, agar siz shu olimlarni diyorimizga taklif qilsangiz, ularga shart-sharoitlarni yaratsangiz, ilmi urfonlar majlisini qilib, yurtimiz ziyoga to'lgan bo'lurdi. Shohim,
Tushunarli Abu Ahmad. Siz darhol Biruniga chopar yo'llang. Uni o'z vataniga qaytishga ko'ndirsin. Va Jurjoniyada Biruni uchun barcha sharoitlar yaratib berilsin.
ma'qul shoh. Tashakkur.
Filled with the longing of the motherland, Biruni accepts the invitation and comes to Urgench. Shortly after Biruni's arrival to Urgench, Vizier Abu Ahmed el-Sehli presented Biruni to Khwarazm-Shah Ali bin Memun in Shah Palace.
Assalomu alaykum.
Va alaykum assalom. Ey Abu Rayhon, mamlakatimizga xush kelibsan, safolar keltiribsan. O'tgan voqealar o'tmishda qoldi. Sen o'z ishingni, o'z mamlakatingda davom ettirishingni xohlayman. Sen aytgan barcha narsalar muhayyo qilingay. Shu bilan birga shu joylarda ishlashni xohlaydigan olimlar bo'lsa, ularning nomlarini ayt. Biz ularni ham taklif qilgaymiz.
Menga qilgan e'tiboringiz uchun tashakkur. Albatta o'z vatanimda Tug'ilib o'sgan makonimda ishlash menga maroqli. Hozirda islom dunyosida ilm va fikr masalalarida shuhrat qozongan taniqli kishilar bor. Shunday kishilardan biri yoshligidan katta shuhrat qozongan, butun umrini ilm fanga baxsh etgan hakim Ibn Sino. Men u kishi bilan bir paytlar maktublashib, fizika, metafizika sohasidagi kamchiliklarni aytgan edim. Menga qilgan javoblaridan butkul qoniqmagan bo'lsam-da, u kishidan ko'mak olishimiz mumkin deb o'ylayman. Yana Hasan ibn Xoris as-Siyraxsi, Abu Nasr ibn Iroq, Abu Sahl Iso al-Masihiy, bu xayr al-Hammarlarni ham bu yerga taklif qilib, ularni dunyoviy hamda ilmiy fikrlarini qo'llab-quvvatlasak, hozirgi paytda bizga islom mamlakatlarining qiziqishi ortgani kabi butun jahonni o'zimizga jalb etgan bo'lamiz.
Ey Abu Rayhon, bundan boshlab ilm fan yo'lida sen mening maslahatchim bo'lasan.
Bosh ustiga.
Aytgan olimlaringni taklif qil va ishni boshla.
In his work entitled Al-Musammer fi Ahbar Hivarim, Biruni speaks in praise of Abu al-Abbas Memnun, who is married to the sister of Sultan Mahmud of Ghazni, and states that he is a man of letters, a person who is benevolent, generous, and docile.
I had been at his service for 7 years and heard not a single bad word in his mouth. When he grew furious, the worst thing he would utter was, "You dog."
Biruni narrates one of his most remarkable memories with the Sultan as follows.
One day, Khwarazm Shah Memun mounted his horse and came to my chamber and said he wanted to see me. I sprang to my feet, but he hurried into my room on his horse and attempted to dismount. I ran to him, bowed down in reverence and beseeched, trying to keep him out of my chamber, yet he insistently said to me, "Science and wisdom is above any kind of governance. It is people who are to visit scholars, not otherwise. I would never summon you if it were not for those earthly engagements. Nothing can outweigh wisdom and knowledge. Wisdom and knowledge has the highest rank."
While in Khwarezm, Biruni set up an observatory circle in the name of Khwarazm Shah Memun, called Al-Halqat Ush-Shahir, and maintained his studies observations there.
At the time when Biruni lived in Urgench, some of the leading scholars of the time, such as Ibn Iraq, Ibn Sina, Abu Sahl al-Masiha, and Ibn al-Hamar, were also dwelling there. According to the records provided by Nizami Aruzi Samarkandi, author of Jahar Makale in Khwarezm, the studies carried out by those eminent scholars and thinkers in the court of Memunis yield a vast influence across Central Asia in a short period. Sultan Mahmud of Ghazni, upon hearing their reputation, orders Khwarazm Shah Ali bin Memun, his brother-in-law, to send those scholars to Ghazni, his capital city. Otherwise, he says he will have to go himself and take them by force. Upon the request, Khwarazm Shah Ali bin Memun gathers the scholars and delivers Sultan Mahmud al-Ghazni's ordinance, emphasizing that he cannot go against the Sultan's demand. He adds that he could send those who volunteer to Ghazni, but set free those who are unwilling. Abu Nasr ibn Araq and Biruni agreed to go to Ghazni. Ibn Isina and Abu Sahl al-Masiha, however, refused to go and leave Urgench on their own will. On their way, they are caught in a sandstorm and lose their way in the desert. Abu Sahl al-Masihi gets lost, and no one receives any news from him ever since. Ibn Isina, on the other hand, after a laborious journey, managed to reach Bavard, a town close to Nessa, and survives.
Meanwhile, Al-Qadir ul-Billah, Caliph of Abbasids, sent Khwarazm Shah Memnun a kaftan authorizing him head of the Sultanate. Nonetheless, Khwarazm Shah Memnun, fearing to incur Sultan Mahmud of Ghazi's wrath, instead of receiving the kaftan personally, assigned Biruni to go and take it in his name.
Sultan Mahmud of Ghazni, who was uncomfortable with this situation, as he predicted, asked Khwarezm Shah Memnun to have Friday sermons recited in his country on behalf of him. However, the prominent people of the city did not accept it, and the revolting Urgench people killed Khwarezm Shah Memnun. Sultan Mahmud of Ghazni, who felt sorry for this situation, took action to avenge his brother-in-law, and on July the 7th, 1017, he captured the annexed Khwarezm. He took Biruni with many of the Khwarezmians and took them to Ghazni. In the past, the scholar who lived a difficult and troubled life in a village near Kabul was able to complete his important work titled Tahdidu Nihayati al-Amakin li Tashihi Mesafati Mesakin, which he started to write here only on the 28th of August, 1025. Later, Biruni, who came to Ghazni 145 kilometers north of Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan, with Sultan Mahmud of Ghazni, loved the climate of this place and lived here until the death by regarding it as his second homeland. With his works and his observations, Biruni gained the appreciation of Sultan Mahmud of Ghazni, who was said to not behave very well at the beginning. He made an observation instrument, el-Halkutu Yemeniye, named by Sultan Mahmud in Ghazni. Sultan Mahmud, who was a deep Sunni, was given the title of Emiru il-Millah and Yeminu Devle by the Abbasid caliphs because they ended their Shiite Buvehi domination in Iran, Iraq, and Khorasan region. This great statesman, who made 17 expeditions to the Indian subcontinent, went down in history as the conqueror of India. Biruni went to India with Sultan Mahmud of Ghazni. He was particularly interested in Indian religions and cultures and learned Sanskrit. According to the testimony of the German researcher E. Sachau, on this occasion he visited 11 Indian cities and started to write his book called Tahtiku Ma'li Hind by discussing with many Hindu reverends and scientists.
It is a great work written 10 centuries ago, but I can say with sincerity that it is at least 10 centuries ahead of us. Why am I saying this? The first reason is in terms of scientific rigor. The second reason is in terms of methodology. Now, I personally observed many things Biruni wrote in the framework of today. I had nearly 3 years of experience in India. I went there and saw it. It is possible to see the things written there exactly. Biruni is like a camera.
The great scholar, who also met the representatives of the Chinese and Uyghur Turks who came to Ghazni in 1027, received information about the geographical structure of their country. In the days when he completed his work titled Tahqiq Ma'lili Hind, Sultan Mahmud died in 1030. His son Mesud, who took his place, does not defect Biruni by following his father's footsteps. He also writes his famous work called El Kanuni I Mesudi fi Lihaiti Nujum on behalf of this ruler.
This work also reveals its own arguments by rejecting Batlamisu's thesis that the Sun and other planets revolve around the world, and in return, we see that Mesud of Ghazni gave him an elephant burden of silver money, but he did not accept it and returned it to the state treasury.
Masud's son, Mevdud, takes over the throne by fighting with his uncle Muhammad, who is sitting on his father's throne. In the period of Mevdud, Biruni wrote the book Ed Dustur and El Jamahir fi Jawahir. There is not much information about the next stage of his life. However, he personally reports that he was able to write his famous book, Kitabi Saidan Bi'itib, which is a very important source related to pharmacy and pharmacology, with the help of a friend when he was over 80 years old.
Shadows of advanced age began to show their effects. Now I'm 80 years old. My ears can only hear loud sounds and hardly solve words. Despite my advanced age and blind eyes, I continue to read and write with the help of a friend. I learned the Greek names of many plants from a Byzantine Greek who came to Khwarezm in my childhood. I was also very interested in different languages. Fortunately, I'm about to complete my work on pharmacy today. If my life is enough, there are many more scientific topics that I will investigate. I would like to give my last breath on the way of knowledge. This is my only wish from Allah.
As far as it is known, Biruni has over 150 written works. However, the number of works that reach today is about 20 to 25. Mihrajan and Nevruz days, these are holidays. Apart from these, he was a person who writes, draws, thinks every minute at any moment, not keeping away from the pen, not stopping his observations. He was a person who did not stay away from science except for holidays.
In this chapter, we have watched some sections of the life of a great genius, full of adventure, excitement, and success, of a knowledge far beyond the era, which is burning with a love of research, analysis, and discovery, marking a century. In the next section, the experiments carried out by the great knowledge, the great discoveries made, and the extraordinary examples of the astronomical instruments he found, especially astrolabe, will be modeled with digital effects and moved to the present day.